How much time did you actually spend on your business last week? Not how much you planned to, not how much you felt like you did. I mean, actual logged proven hours. I asked myself that question a few months ago, and the answer humbled me more than my auntie asking me why I'm still not a doctor. I genuinely believed I was putting in 7 hours a week on my newsletter. Focused, productive, intentional hours. I could feel it, I was busy. The reality, it was just 3 hours. And my weekly newsletter, it was taking over 2 weeks to publish, sometimes even 3. Here's what hit hardest. I had no idea how much time I was actually spending, not even close. And the moment I started tracking it honestly, everything started to shift. In this video, we're going to cover why your gut instinct about your own productivity is basically lying to you, how a dead simple tracking habit exposes the truth and forces a change, and why seeing the data is more powerful than any motivational video you'll ever watch, including this one. Look, I want to start with something a little uncomfortable. Most aspiring creators I know, people juggling a 9 to 5, family, trying to build something on the side, they all say the same thing: I just don't have the time. And honestly, I get it. You finish work, the kids need something, your wife is asking you why you're still on your laptop at 11 PM again. And somewhere in that chaos, you're supposed to build a business. It can feel impossible. But here's what I've come to believe. The time problem is almost never actually about time. It's about awareness. We have no idea where our time is actually going. We feel busy, we feel productive, but feelings aren't data. And running a business on vibes is a beautiful way to stay exactly where you are. Trust me, I know. I committed to publishing a newsletter once a week. Simple enough, right? But weeks would pass between emails and I genuinely had no idea why the newsletter was taking so long. I was doing something every day, but what was I actually doing? Then I started tracking 2 things: how much time I spent on content creation each day and how long it took from starting a newsletter to actually hitting publish. Ali Abdal, someone who's built a serious content business and helped thousands of creators, he said the single most effective thing he does for his students isn't teaching them a strategy or handing them a perfect content calendar. It's getting them to track their time, full stop. Because until you track it, you're navigating without a map. You're making real business decisions based on a feeling, and feelings, as we all know, are not reliable narrators. Now let me show you something that made this really land for me. So let me walk you through this, because this diagram is basically the whole video in 2 columns. On the left hand side, your perceived reality. This is what I genuinely believed about my own content work. 7 hours a week, publishing weekly, and my explanation for why things weren't growing fast enough. I just don't have enough time. That was my answer for everything. On the right side, this is the actual reality. Once I started tracking, I realized I was just spending 3 hours a week. A newsletter that came out every 2 to 3 weeks. And the real cause of that slow growth, it wasn't time. It was because I had no measurement and had no feedback loop telling me when I was drifting. Now here's why this diagram matters more than just the wrong numbers. It's about the gap between the perceived reality and the actual reality and the impact that has on you psychologically. When you're operating on the left side, the perceived side, you feel like you're working hard, you feel like you deserve results, and when the results don't come, you feel confused, a little victimized even, like, I'm doing everything I can, why isn't this working? And that confusion leads to frustration, to burnout, or worse, giving up right before things would have turned around. But when you move to the right side, the actual side, something shifts. You stop feeling hard done by and start seeing clearly. You weren't doing everything you could. You were putting in 3 hours and expecting 7-hour results. Think of it like driving with no headlights. You're in a car, you're holding the wheel, and if it's someone like me, it's probably in a Toyota or a Lexus, and you're moving, but you can't see where you're going. Tracking is actually switching those headlights on. The moment I saw the gap, 7 hours versus 3, I stopped blaming my schedule, my job, my kids, my auntie who pops around unannounced with biryani and questions my life. I started looking at the data, and that's when things actually started to change. The numbers weren't discouraging, they were clarifying. There's a big difference. You know that feeling when you wake up on Saturday and you're planning to write a script or film a YouTube video, you set up your desk, you've made your chai, you're ready, and somehow it's 10 PM and you've watched like 47 videos about productivity without even being slightly productive, yeah? That was me, like on most weekends. And the wild part, I thought weekends were my best work days. More hours, fewer meetings, surely I'd get loads done, right? But when I started tracking, I discovered something completely backwards. I was more productive on the weekday mornings than I ever was on the weekends. Weekends felt like I'd have a lot more work time, but between family things and random errands and IKEA furniture that requires an engineering degree to assemble, weekends were actually my worst days for focused creative output. And my best writing, my best work, it was in the mornings, not nights when I was fighting to keep my eyes open, staring at a screen, telling myself I was disciplined. Really, I was just tired and stubborn. But the key thing is that you don't get these insights from guessing, you only get them from data. There's a study that found people who track their weight daily are significantly more likely to lose weight weight than those who don't. Not because weighing yourself burns calories, but because it forces you to confront reality every single morning. You can't lie to a scale. I started applying this to my Arabic learning as well, and I'm using a method called comprehensive input, which is about watching a lot of Arabic content and trusting the acquisition process. But trusting the process only works if you're actually doing the process. So I track it 30 minutes a day. Did I actually hit it? Or was I just thinking about learning Arabic while making my third cup of chai? The tracker became my accountability partner. Not my wife, not my coach, Google spreadsheet. And honestly, it worked better than both. Here's what tracking does that nothing else can do. It removes the story you tell yourself. We are extraordinarily good at convincing ourselves we're doing more than we are. It's basically a human superpower. Catastrophically optimistic about how much we've actually done. However, the tracker doesn't care about your story. It just shows you the number, and the number doesn't sugarcoat anything. Here's the stat that generally stopped me when I first read it. Content creators who track their creative hours produce 3 times more content than those who don't. 3 times, not 10% more, not a little better, 3 times. That's not a marginal improvement. That's a completely different tier of output from the same person, from the same hours in the day, just with a tracker. And when you dig into why, it actually makes complete sense. Think about the last time you spent a whole afternoon working but barely got anything done. You were at your desk, you were technically present, but you were also checking your phone like every 8 minutes, you were answering quick messages, going down the YouTube rabbit hole, convincing yourself that watching someone else's content counts as research. It happens. We're not machines. But what happens when you know you have to log those hours honestly? That empty box in your tracker becomes the most powerful accountability tool you'll ever own. Nobody wants to put a 0 in the column. Nobody wants to look at Monday 0, Tuesday 0, Wednesday 0. It's like when your wife asks you if you've been working on your business and you say yes, but really your textbook was open and while you were on your phone. By tracking those numbers, you get that feedback loop and can see what you're actually doing rather than what you perceived you were doing. So this is what I call the tracking feedback loop. And once you see it working in your own life, you won't want to go back to guessing. Step 1, you track your hours. Simple. You look how much time you actually spent on content creation today. Not roughly, not I think about an hour. You log it with actual numbers, and ideally you do it as soon as you've done a bit of works. Step 2, you see the reality, and specifically this is the crucial bit. You see the actual number. How many hours did you actually put in this week? Not how many you planned to, not how many you felt like you did, the real number staring back at you. Most people, the first time they're truly honest about this, they're genuinely surprised. The number is always lower than expected, always. Step 3, you course correct early. This is one of the most underrated benefits of daily tracking. You catch your drift before you've lost the whole week. Instead of arriving at Friday thinking, where did my time go? You can see by Wednesday if you're behind. Still have 2 or 3 days to make it up. That's a completely different game psychologically. Step 4, you produce more. Because you're spending more time actually creating, you've removed the blind spots, the unconscious drift, the convincing yourself that being busy with screens is the same as building something. And step 5, this one generally surprised me. You build evidence. You look at your tracker after 6 weeks of consistent logging and it becomes proof that you can trust yourself. You stop thinking, I'm not the kind of person who sticks with things, because the data literally shows you otherwise. You did it. It's right there. You can see the evidence. A real example from my own life is I used to obsess over trying to get more subscribers, my open rates. Why wasn't my newsletter growing? Now I describe my content strategy to people and I talk about this big media empire I'd like to build from my spare room. But then I checked my tracker, 3 hours of actual work that week. The answer wasn't mysterious why it wasn't growing. It was mathematical. You can't grow what you're not consistently building. Something unexpected happened when I started tracking consistently. It became addictive in the best possible way. I'd look at last week's numbers, say 4 hours on content creation, and feel this pull to match it, beat it, turn the whole thing into a private competition with myself. Can I hit 5 hours a week? Can I string 3 weeks at 5 hours and try 6? But even more powerful than the competition is the evidence tracking creates. When you look back at a month of data and see you've showed up day after day, even when you were tired, even when you were busy, even when my son decided that bedtime meant to get all the toys out, that's concrete proof that you can do hard things consistently. You stop thinking, I can't build this, and start thinking, look, I literally did this for 6 weeks straight. That's a totally different internal conversation. I did the same thing with my Quran reading. For daily habits, I actually prefer a paper journal over any app. There's something satisfying about physically ticking a box. It's tactile, it's final, it's done. Looking back over a month and seeing that 20 out of those 30 days I've been able to read the Quran, that's just not a habit. That's evidence of character. You showed up when it was inconvenient. The data captured it. It's like Ramadan actually. You don't feel the discipline on day 1, 2 or 3. You're dragging yourself out of bed for suhoor, and you feel really tired. But by day 20, you've kind of got used to it. You built up that discipline. You didn't notice the transformation happening, but by showing up every day and and tracking it, you'll see exactly where it took root. There's an analogy about climbing mountains I keep coming back to. There's no secret shortcut, just step after step after step. That's what building a content business actually looks like. Everyone loves the start, the ideas, the energy, that I'm going to build something real feeling. Everyone loves the end, the subscribers, the income, the moment it all clicks. But nobody loves the boring middle, the unglamorous stretch where you're showing up, logging your hours, producing content that maybe 3 people are watching. That's where most people quit, and that's where tracking saves you, because it makes the invisible work visible. You can track progress even when you can't feel it yet. Here's the truth about any system. If it's complicated, you won't use it. I can say that with absolute confidence because I've tried the complicated version. I've used fancy time tracking apps. I've built elaborative spreadsheets with color-coded dashboards and conditional formatting that basically needed their own instruction manual. It didn't stick, not even for a week. What actually worked? A simple Google Sheet. 3 columns, date, what I worked on, and hours. That's it. Bookmark in my browser, literally 1 click away. The lower the friction, the more I'll update it, honestly. My routine, I work on my business before my full-time job starts in the morning. I track straight after I finish that bit of work when it's fresh and I can be accurate. I use the Pomodoro technique with a timer, which makes logging easy, and I definitely recommend people check out the Pomodoro technique. It works really well. And you know, if I track my data and I'm off by a few minutes, that's fine. It doesn't matter. The goal isn't precision, it's about building awareness. And for daily habits like Quran, exercise, learning Arabic, I prefer a paper journal, just a physical tip, because these habits need a slightly different kind of accountability, less analytical and more kind of just, did I do it or not? So let me show you the whole thing laid out simply. Okay, this is the whole system, and I want you to notice something important about it. It's embarrassingly simple. That's completely intentional. On the left, content work tracking. The tool I use is just a Google Sheet. Nothing paid, nothing with a learning curve, and nothing that requires an onboarding tutorial. You open it, log the date, what you worked on, and for how long. And I do this right after my morning session while the memory is fresh. If I've been using Pomodoros, which I strongly recommend for focus work, I just count them out and convert them into minutes. The critical detail here is the Wednesday check-in, and for you it doesn't have to be a Wednesday, it could be like any day, but I'm not waiting until Sunday. I'm not waiting until the end of the month. Wednesday, why? Because if you're behind on Wednesday, you still have time to fix it. You have 3 days to recover. If you wait until Sunday to look at your week, it's already gone. You're just doing an autopsy. On the right, I have my daily habits. So this is where I like to use a paper journal. It's just a physical tick. I know it sounds almost too simple, but there's something about a handwritten tick that a phone notification just can't replicate. The review here is a weekly look back, just scanning the last 7 days or even like weeks and looking for any patterns. What did I actually do? Where did I not kind of do something? Do I need to change the habit? Do I need to think about when I'm doing that? What sort of surprised me? And at the end of the diagram, right at the bottom, there's one rule that this system is built on. If it's complicated, it won't last. We already have complicated lives. Tracking system needs to be simpler than everything else, or it quietly becomes one more thing to manage and you drop it by week 3 without even noticing. Pick whatever format works for you. Digital, paper, a whiteboard, a Google Doc even. The tool doesn't matter, starting matters. And making starting simple always beats starting perfect. Here's the one thing I want you to carry out from this video, and it's not the Google Sheet, it's not the Pomodoro timer, it's not the Wednesday check-in. These are all tools. The real insight is this: you cannot improve what you cannot see. That's it. That's the whole thing. Here's what I've noticed about most people who hear this. They'll nod, they'll think, yeah, that makes sense, I should do it. And then they'll close the video, go back to feeling busy, and wonder in 3 months why they still haven't published consistently. They'll have a vague sense that they should be doing more, but without measurement, that feeling has nowhere to land. It just becomes background guilt. But not you, because you know what's actually happening. You know the gap between perceived and actual. You know that 3 hours of scattered distracted work and 7 hours of logged honest output are completely different things. You know the boring middle is where it's really won. We started the video with a question: how much time did you actually spend on your business last week? Go find out. That's your one thing this week. Not build a system, not overhaul your schedule. Just this: pull up a Google Sheet, grab a piece of paper and just track this week. 7 days, see what the number says. I promise you the number will tell you more about your business than any strategy course, any content calendar or any motivational video ever could, including this one. If you want more of this, the honest stuff, the real stuff, what it actually looks like to build something as a Muslim solopreneur, please join my email newsletter. Will be in the description below.